Hi, everybody, and welcome to the first Boulder Council breakdown of 2023. Welcome to the new year. We hope that you had a good end to 2022 and having a good beginning of 2023 so far. We are here this morning to discuss a council meeting from January 5th. Lauren, do you want to start out? One of the big things we talked about last night was this news that we got just before the holidays about methamphetamine being found in the library. What did you kind of take away from some of the discussion last night?
We had the library director and also some speakers from Boulder County Public Health come in and talk about just, both how this is an issue that's really larger than the city of Boulder and our community. This is really a national issue. Being incredibly transparent about the timeline of what they knew when and as well as sort of the steps that they're going through in cleanup and what they're going to do in the future to help make sure that the community is really protected from contamination issues and things like that. So I would really encourage you to watch that section of the meeting if you're interested in they went into a ton of detail that and just have so much more in terms of being able to express sort of the variety of issues that they're dealing with there that I found really interesting and helpful.
It's an interesting thing, right? We've been doing kind of a similar policy for the last 4 or 5 years. Nothing has changed on this council other than that we're working on opening up a day shelter for people to spend time during the day. And to me, this is something I think that we'll be discussing a little bit more as we have a bigger conversation about methamphetamine use coming up in the next few months, just for us to really think about how our policy and approach to unsheltered homelessness is interacting with growing drug use in our community and across the Front Range and around the country, and see if we can figure out some better solutions that do not have people using in our public restrooms.
Yeah, and that it's not a library issue, right? It's a community health issue, and it's not. Other communities have apparently since in the Front Range have since reached out to Boulder to get more information about it. So I think that we're probably going to see that, other communities around us are struggling with a lot of the same issues too as we move forward.
Right. Yeah.
How do we all work together to provide the best solutions we can to the community? Some of the other things that came up in the meeting. So we had 2 projects. That one was a project we had called up earlier and we were reviewing sort of the call up, and the other is a project that we opted to call up and we will review at an upcoming meeting. But in both of these cases, these are development projects where the underlying zoning is not delivering what we want in terms of the size and density of housing. The underlying zoning is requiring the developer to do much lower density projects. And that means in most cases, when we're talking about the density of projects, it's really about the number of dwelling units within the building. Typically, the building envelope is relatively similar, whether we're giving sort of an exemption or not always, but it's generally fairly similar. And the main question is how many people are allowed to be in this building. And I think that having our codes and regulations often not aligning with what we want to see as a community is causing a lot of time from council to be spent on these things, a lot of frustration from the developers because they're having to go through these unpredictable processes that take a long time. And it also causes a lot of frustration from the community because there is less predictability in what is allowed and what might happen adjacent to various properties. So that's something that we're working on in the long term, but in the short term, it causes a lot of these sort of issues to come forward and us to all spend a lot of time talking about very specific projects.
And Lauren, with that, I just wanted to kind of highlight a couple of things that you brought up that I think I'm starting to understand after having been seeing these projects and reading things for the last year or so, but others may not. So can you talk about what a call up is for any of our listeners who may not understand that?
It's basically when a developer or a property owner wants to do something where they can't just go in and apply for a permit, they have to do an additional step beforehand. And that additional step involves sort of getting feedback from the city's planning and zoning department, as well as the planning board. And both of those, both the city's staff and the planning board will make recommendations around the project, around whether or not it's meeting the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan and its goals, and whether or not it's in line with the neighborhood feel, and a whole variety of different things. And then they make a recommendation to council, and council has the ability to leave that sort of recommendation in place or to call up the project. And if we call up the project, basically that means we get the council gets a full presentation from city staff and from the applicant, and we have the opportunity to change the previous direction that has been given on that project. In both of the cases for sort of the projects we were talking about last night, these were concept phase, so at the very beginning of the project. And the applicants in both cases wanted city council to call up the projects, because at the end of the site review process, council will be the final vote on these. And they want to make sure that what they're doing is in line with what the council ultimately wants to see, because these developers are going to spend a lot of time and money getting really specific plans and 3D renderings and sort of this whole package of documentation together for the city. And if it's not at all in the right direction, you know, that's a huge waste of time and money on everyone's part. So they're trying to make sure that they're really closely aligned with what the city is, and specifically council, is asking for in these areas.
Yeah, thanks for that. That seems a hard thing to do when councils change as well, because I imagine that somebody like a future council that didn't like what we had done could come back and try to change it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it just points out how much risk there actually is in developing these larger scale projects in Boulder, because public sentiment changes, council changes, all of those things can completely overturn, you know, the best laid plans.
Yeah, seems like, and especially given that you know, things tend to be a little bit slow, because we do oversee a lot of the stuff more closely than many communities do, then that sort of increases the chances that a project is going to go over councils, or, you know, change over community sentiment or something like that.
Absolutely.
And then the other thing that we talked a little bit about last night was just a micro mobility update. So we started this e-scooter pilot program with the Lime scooters a couple of years ago, and we were basically just getting an update on how that program had gone. Overall, it has gone fairly well. There were some kind of concerns that members of the community had raised over the course of surveying the pilot outcomes, and some of those things we're going to be changing so that we can maybe do better as the program starts expanding. We're moving toward having some docking stations, kind of like the B-cycles have, as well as having some designated parking areas, but expect to see the Lime scooters expanding a little bit more, hopefully starting to get into some of our neighborhoods as well. And just, we're going to continue evolving that program as it moves forward. So just a couple of things coming up in January at our future meetings. Next week on the 12th, we will have a study session. We're going to be talking about some airport related issues. We're going to be talking about community broadband, and we'll be discussing something that maybe most members of the community are not too interested in, but just how we do board and commission work, in particular, having some council liaisons on some of our boards and commissions and how we might go about that. On the 19th, we're back to a regular meeting for the third Thursday of the month. And we're going to have a debrief on some changes to our emergency alert system and how that worked recently. We'll be having a few public hearings on the electronic smoking device tax and a move to exempt personal hygiene products from our city sales tax. On the 26th, the one thing scheduled so far for that study session is a discussion of our ADU regulations. We have a number of events going on in the city to honor Dr. King. Saturday the 14th from 1 to 4 at the Meadows Branch Library. Local nonprofit Hella Community Organization is going to be doing some South Sudanese traditional dances featuring South Sudanese church choirs. There will be some refreshments as well. On the 15th, starting at 4 o'clock at the Jewish Community Center, there's going to be an event presented by the NAACP Boulder County branch, the Second Baptist Church in the Museum of Boulder, that's going to feature music, dance, and spoken word. And that will be a really wonderful opportunity to honor Dr. King and just kind of bring the community together. And then, of course, Monday, starting at 2 o'clock at the Dairy Arts Center, there's going to be another event with the Just Us monologues with Dr. Rylan Rabaka from the Cause at CU, the Center for African and African American Studies. And that will also be kind of an arts-based, family-friendly event exploring Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s understanding of poverty and racism. So lots of great opportunities to get out, connect with the community. And I hope that folks will take advantage of some of these opportunities as we head through the month.
Thank you everyone for joining us for the first Boulder Council breakdown of the year. I hope everyone is off to a great start of 2023.